His research question isn't why are the kids so sad? It is how can we convince parents to agree to public education policy introduced by the Libertarian Koch brothers, who believe we all ought to be free to sell ourselves into slavery, pollution should be legal, and child labor and marriage laws are too strict.
Jonathan Haidt's newest book, The Anxious Generation, was published March 26, 2024. I've been seeing this conversation everywhere. Haidt is on every podcast, The Daily Show, TikTok. He's everywhere with his anti-smartphone for teenagers agenda.
But never before has there been a new technology that almost instantly caused a wave of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide.
Third is phone-free schools. And this one is a no-brainer. And this one is happening.
Yeah.
To be in school and have the entire internet in your pocket. You know, when I was a kid, if they'd said, oh, you can bring your television into class, you can bring your walkie-talkies, you can bring your guitar, like, that, how could you possibly listen to the teacher?
Yeah.
And then the fourth norm is the hardest for the adults, but it's going to be the best for the kids. Far more free play, independence, and responsibility in the real world. Like, your parents grew up in a much more dangerous time. All kids went out to play. Of course, they had to. They all did.
That's really
That's
funny.
pretty funny. You have to stand like up close. Do like forced perspective of the rings.
Do they, Gandalf? When people tell you who you are, you should listen.
Yup. I'm Kristen. Hi, welcome to I Think We Might Be Lost. A lot about this world is pretty disorienting, and we're trying our best to make sense of it. I'm Kristen, and this is Jaren. I hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe.
Here's a dart gun.
Yeah.
So you can show your anger and you can dart anybody in the world. You can shame them. The content, something like the content, is the juicy piece of meat that the burglar carries to distract the dog. And the same thing with social media. The content isn't that important.
The main thesis of this book is that teenagers have been reporting an increase of mental illness at the same time as the use of smartphones with front-facing cameras and social media. Therefore, the two are likely causal and should inform policy decisions restricting the use of cell phones for teenagers.
If this had all started in 2020, we could say, well, yeah, you know, COVID and all the craziness that's going on. But this started in 2012. Mm-hmm. There's no other explanation that anyone's proposed for why it happened in so many countries and hit girls the hardest. There is no other theory on the table. Nobody has even proposed a theory for why it's happening in so many countries.
Yeah.
But people on the far left, the far right, and also trolls, there are men, primarily men.
Crazy people, yeah.
That's right, who just enjoy being jerks.
You might say psychology and mental health today is in danger, and psychologists are in danger to become the priests of industrial system.
Because Haidt is not just acting as a social psychologist, presenting research that he has done on his own, in these interviews and in this book, I think it's really important to look at his politics, because he's not just presenting research, he is also proposing policy.
The first one is no smartphone before high school. The millennials didn't get smartphones till they were in college. Give a kid a flip phone, give them a brick phone, send them out, they can text you. They don't need the whole internet in their pocket, instead of talking to their friends. The second norm is no social media until 16. Social media is wildly inappropriate for children. The sex, the strange men contacting you, the violence, let's have a minimum floor of 16.
He's putting his gun on the desk in between us as I'm telling him what he's doing. He never denied sending her Snapchats. He confirmed the reason why he said you're so pretty is because she's beautiful. He texted another little girl, Snapchatted her and said cute toes.
Third is phone-free schools. And this one is a no-brainer. And this one is happening.
Yeah.
To be in school and have the entire internet in your pocket. You know, when I was a kid, if they'd said, oh, you can bring your television into class, you can bring your walkie-talkies, you can bring your guitar, like, that, how could you possibly listen to the teacher?
Yeah.
And then the fourth norm is the hardest for the adults, but it's going to be the best for the kids. Far more free play, independence, and responsibility in the real world. Like, your parents grew up in a much more dangerous time. All kids went out to play. Of course, they had to. They all did.
He's not just presenting research, he is also proposing policy, education policy, and policy around age gating certain things. on social media and like the use of the internet and different communication tools. So like understanding his politics, like where he's coming from, is super important. And for that, I think I just want to like use his actual own research to explain what it means to be a libertarian. We have like evidence of him doing a pretty good job at research from like before he started this whole write pop culture books for airlines, like for like Hudson News. I'm not really sure. But yeah, Jonathan Haidt will call himself a centrist, but he also will call himself a libertarian. And for the most part, it seems like he aligns with libertarians. He is the co-founder of Heterodox Academy, and Heterodox Academy is like leaned very libertarian. So I think it's like safe to say that he's probably coming from a libertarian point of view. It seems like within libertarian circles, people can't necessarily agree with what it means to be a libertarian or like what that actually entails. So like, far be it for me to like say what it means to be a libertarian. I'm definitely not one myself. But I do have some research as to like the morality and point of view and worldview of libertarians and like personality stuff from Jonathan Haidt's own research from 2012. The study is called Early Johnny Days. Hold on. See? It's like a real published study, and his name is right here. Jonathan Haidt. It's the last author, but he still is a listed author on here. And he still like did this project, and it seems like he probably cared about it. I assume he added all the Ayn Rand quotes in here throughout, something I've never seen in a research paper before, but go off, have a hobby. That's fine. This is called Understanding Libertarian Morality, the Social Disposition of Self-Identified Libertarians. So people took a survey online, and they also were like, are you a libertarian? If they said yes, they compared their results to liberals and conservatives in America. I think, hold on. Libertarians appear more individualistic and less identified with their community compared to both liberals and conservatives. Feel relatively low levels of connection to their community, country, and people globally. Table 4 shows that libertarians showed the lowest levels of loving feeling towards others across all 4 categories. Lower endorsement of values related to altruism, conformity, and tradition. Low degree of the broad social connection, Big 5 personality. Libertarians showed lower than the other 2 groups on agreeableness, conscientiousness, and extroversion. Low scores on agreeableness in particular have been said to indicate a lack of compassion and a critical, skeptical nature. Low levels of sympathy and concern for unfortunate general rejection of altruism as a moral duty. Libertarians that were systemizers and not empathizers, they scored really low on empathizing, obviously. Libertarians score the lowest of any group on empathizing. While we may say that liberals have the most feminine cognitive style, libertarians have the most masculine. Indeed, the feminizing of the Democratic Party in the 1970s may help explain why libertarians moved increasingly into the Republican Party in the 1980s. What the fuck was that? Don't tread on me, which is becoming a slogan of Ron Paul's 2008 presidential campaign, is frequently displayed on signs and flags at rallies for Tea Party supporters. Tea Party. Jonathan Haidt. Blah, blah, blah. People are left alone to enjoy the fruits of their own labor, free from government interference. Libertarianism is clearly not just a point on the liberal-conservative continuum. So, by your own research, libertarians are not great to be around. Anyways, that's what a libertarian is, according to Jonathan Haidt's research about the personality and morals of libertarians. There's like infighting a little bit, and like, I get it. It seems like everyone's massively disagreeable and can't see each other's point of view. So like, obviously they're all fighting. obviously they're all fighting. Anyways,
To warp the developmental process, social development, political development, spiritual, everything gets warped. And this is having a transformative effect on our politics. The left and the right are going completely insane in this country. And I think it's going to drive us to ruin. But the insanity came especially, or at least was amplified by social media when everyone has that anger button with a dart gun.
But he's not trying to treat the teenage girl anxiety and depression. He is trying to treat the feeling of powerlessness in that teenage girl's parents.
It really feels like, yeah, it's just because it feels like so much of it is like appealing to an overall sense, like there's like a weird appeal to authority, but the authority is this sort of like, I hate to say boomer anxiety, but it really feels like something that happened with me was that stupid rules that didn't make sense, especially when they were based on stuff that like my parents really didn't understand. I didn't respect those rules because they didn't make any sense and they weren't based on anything real.
No.
And like, that's what's going to happen if you make your kid lose the little social life they have left. You see her that the boogeyman is on Instagram.
I've never seen the boogeyman on Instagram.
But I think it was actually just the Babadook, which is actually still released. So it represents like loss. I don't know. It was a scary.
I'm afraid the role of the mental health movement and the role of psychology and psychiatry are to help to adjust man somewhat more, to make him function more smoothly.
Economic freedom was the basis of this development. The middle class was its champion. The individual was no longer bound by a fixed social system based on tradition.
That is to say, to help people adjust to a system where they are supposed to produce and to consume in masses, in groups, directed by central organization and slogans, and yet at the same time not to be aware. They are dissatisfied with that. They suffer from it. They suffer from what the French already called in the 18th century la maladie du siècle, the illness of the century, from boredom, from the meaninglessness of life. Now, there is a danger in that they might get sick, that they might have manifest symptoms, that they might protest, that they might want to make life more meaningful. And then many psychologists come and say, you shouldn't be dissatisfied. If you are dissatisfied, that means you're neurotic. And we'll adjust you so that you accept a meaningless life without rebelling against it, without symptoms, and you will have a nice funeral anyway.
this book is written to parents and other stakeholders who are adults who feel powerless in their relationship with their children. Haidt speaks to the powerlessness, as he should. Parents don't really have much say in what their teenagers do. They don't have much of an influence anymore, and parents, on the whole, don't make that much of a difference. That's scary. It's scary to see the world changing, feeling like there's nothing you can do about it. It's scary to feel powerless. Okay, I get it. The parents feel powerless. There's a power struggle here. And the cause of the power struggle is between the parent and the child and the phone with the front-facing camera. In the good-bin-yada attribution model of moral panics, or you might say reasonable policy recommendations for the greater good of our society, these things come from a few different places: grassroots, interest groups, or elite engineered. Grassroots efforts are led by individuals who are affected by the problem and who find other like-minded people to work on solving the problem together. If Jonathan Haidt talked about his personal experience as a parent of a teenager who started an effort for free time with a local after-school club, and this effort worked so well that other after-school clubs tried it, and the group started a movement motivated by their grand success, that would be a grassroots effort. Haidt is the father of teenagers and very well may have personal experience in the topic of teenagers and their poor mental health due to their smartphone. But he's not coming at us with this book from the angle of being a dad. He is an academic. He's talking about it from the perspective of a psychologist. He's talking about the sociology and how he works at a business school. Haidt is using his credentials to back up what he's saying. Haidt may represent a special interest group in this endeavor. It's possible that he is a covert marketing campaign for Yonder pouches, which he's recommended several times. Or his no smartphone in school policy is maybe a ploy to unload boxes of backstock of Nokia phones that he has found in a storage unit auction. With this kind of hustle to ensure that teenagers don't ever see a smartphone, Jonathan Haidt may be the real-life Helga's dad from Hey Arnold, Beeper King. Okay, it's scary. The Beeper King was a little scary, but as far as threats go, I think we can handle this. In the theory about the attribution model of moral panics, or if you want to say, like Jonathan Haidt does, that this isn't a moral panic, the last place that these policy changes come from is called the elite engineered model. That's whenever an elite group induces or engineers a panic over an issue that they know to be exaggerated in order to move attention away from their own lack of solving social problems. The interest group theory, the middle rungs of power and status, are where moral issues are most significantly felt. Similarly, writings about the Blue Whale Challenge, the Momo Challenge, oh, I remember these. These are all just moral panics that are kind of fabricated to move attention away from what is actually going on in the world. So if there's an elite group of people who maybe should be solving some of society's social problems, but instead they are making them worse, they'll engineer something like, oh, the scary doll on TikTok is scaring children a lot. I have an elderly colleague who got an email about this, and she printed out the email. She opened her email on Internet Explorer and then printed it out and handed it to me and told me I could make copies if I needed to share with other people. And it was about the Momo challenge. And I was like, that's not real. And she was like, no, it's very serious. We need to watch out. I was like, I don't know how to explain to you that that's fabricated, but she's very concerned about it. She was always very concerned about things. It was pretty easy to trick about a moral panic. And that is troublesome. But none of that stuff was real. But the real stuff was that Mark Zuckerberg was slowly buying up the land around us under pseudonyms. That was the real stuff. So if we can just distract from the real stuff, it confuses the public away from organizing in such a way that puts pressures on the powers that be or the most richest people or whoever, whoever is in charge here to do some stuff for the public good. That's how we get labor unions and regulations and OSHA and all of those things are really good for people, but maybe bad for making tons of money at exploitative rates. So if we all decide, hey, I think construction workers should have water breaks, then there's a more higher likelihood that that's going to happen. So an elite engineered moral panic maybe would rely on an interest group to promote this moral panic. And an interest group level person who is promoting a moral panic, maybe on behalf of a real thing that's happening in the world, a real societal ill that they believe needs to be remedied, or someone who's working on the behalf of more powerful and more rich people, go on the podcast and preach about it and tell you about the trouble that is the kids in the playing pool or on Instagram or whatever it is that a group of people are doing that you are trying to make a moral panic about. that person is called a moral entrepreneur. And no matter where Jonathan Haidt is on the scale of, oh, is he coming at it as a dad, or is he coming at it as someone who's interested in this topic and maybe has a special interest in selling something along the way, or if he's somehow influenced by a larger power that has said, we would like you to do this on our behalf so that we may distract the public from what's actually no matter where he falls in that, and no matter how sincere he's being, which I don't think he's being very sincere at all, that person would be called a moral entrepreneur. So if you really feel like something is a problem and you want to go tell everyone about it, you're a moral entrepreneur. Like, you want to tell people about the morals, and maybe you want to make a little money off of it. This guy's writing books. If you're a preacher, you're making a salary off of guiding people morally. If you're an influencer like this, like I want everyone to not feel so insecure, and I don't want the capitalists to win, and I have a certain set of morals that I would like for my audience to consider a little bit more as their own, or feel more comfortable talking about, or like, I have morals that value community. Being hateful and mean to each other is bad and not a good way to have a nice, good human experience. So sure, if this video ever gets monetized, then I would also be a moral entrepreneur. Like, it's not a positive or a negative term. It's just what it's called in this model of moral panics. And I think it's important for us to understand Jonathan Haidt in this way and not understand him as an academic, because he is not doing rigorous research. He's definitely not taking feedback as the process of science would suggest. Like, the last part of the scientific method is revise and redo, and he's not really willing to revise anything that he's saying based on the feedback of his academic colleagues or the general public or anyone that he's giving these things out to. He's not taking feedback, which does not make him a scientist. So we should think about him as a person who's trying to sell us something. What is he trying to sell us, and for what reason, and who pays his salary? Like, I don't really know. Jaren's going to tell us a little bit more about that. I hope he figures it out. But wait, if you're in a power struggle with your child, that tends to make them feel pretty unsafe, because parents are so important to our survival when we're kids. If it feels like you want your kid to turn out a certain way, and it doesn't seem like it's going that way, you might feel powerless. That power struggle really makes your kid feel unsafe, and then they can't really develop into who they are as a person. Or they will. They'll just wait until they're out of your house. But it's so much more expensive than it used to be to get out of your parents' house that I'm worried that a bunch of people are just going to adopt the personality that's best for their parents. Whatever personality keeps them the most safe in these times that are ooh,
if our recruitment numbers go down, then we can't man the 750 military bases we have internationally. And then our trade relationships go to shit because they're basically maintained at the barrel of a gun.
I just think people need to understand that whether people talk about it or the media talks about it, we have a gun violence epidemic.
University, we know what side you're on. Remember South Africa, remember Vietnam.
Jonathan Haidt is selling a devil. He even says so in his book. He says some things are morally up and some things are morally down. Down where the devil is. And your phone, that screen, that's the devil. And it feels nice to have a devil. You have something to fight. Gotta fight the devil. Isn't that great? Too bad it's made up. Or maybe it's not. He doesn't know. He's just selling you something. I think he's selling a moral panic. I think that's pretty easy to do these days.
Amazing. So you pick on the default mode network there, even calling it the profane mode network. Now, I actually call it the imagination brain network.
Okay.
And Mary Helen Immordino Yang and I have written articles arguing specifically that the problem with social media is it's not allowing kids to engage in their default mode network.
Oh.
So the exact opposite argument. So we would actually argue that the default mode network, and this I think actually dovetails the argument about play, is that social media is actually engaging our executive attention network so much on the wrong things that we're not able to have internal constructive reflection.
Oh.
We're not able to make meaning out of our experiences in a personally meaningful way that are productive. We're not imagining our future and our own personal futures. It's actually taking us away from our imagination network.
What is a moral panic? A moral panic is a Too Faced Natural Love palette. I like this a lot. It's like texture. Got little bunny rabbits on it. Love it. A moral panic is whenever the media reports on a folk devil that is taking over a particular social group. Then the general public, or like people outside of that social group, will panic about it and then demand that the authorities do something about this folk devil.
But, what I'm trying to get across, so, in the Anxious generation, what I'm trying to get across is that this is not just another moral panic over the new technologies.
Yes.
2012 is the big year that Instagram really comes out. And as soon as the girls get on Instagram, that's, I can't say it's all from Instagram, but the biggest single cause of the girls' mental health decline, I believe, is social media. And there's plenty of evidence showing there's a correlation. There are a lot of experiments showing it as well. It's causal, it's not just a correlate. What I'm getting at is the complete rewiring of social relations nowadays, especially the main thing that they're doing is TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. The short ones are, for everybody with kids here listening, it's the short videos
Breaks your brain.
that break your brain. That's right. Because the long form videos are a story. They make some sense. You don't do anything. You watch. Whereas the short form is like a dog trainer training a dog. It's, you give them little tiny treats a lot, and you can shape any behavior you want.
Yeah.
In the chapter about spirituality, Haidt talks about a morality dimension in which things are either up or down. He talks about spirituality and morality through the lens of an atheist, coming at it from the outside. So he sort of reads a lot of stuff from one of his other books about spirituality and religion and comes up with some unifying themes and theories about the things that these religions and spiritual practices all have in common. And he said that some stuff is up and some stuff is down. Up stuff is stuff that makes you close to God, stuff that is virtuous, morally good, pure, elevating, the feeling of great literature, charity, beauty. This is good spiritual stuff. He doesn't say it, but a lot of religions would call this heaven or holiness or something where you look up towards a deity, an up direction. And then he says that the opposite of that is down. Stuff that's morally down, spiritually down, is stuff that's selfish. It's disgusting. Something that's morally bad. You've turned away from God and you've come towards the devil. He literally says towards the devil. This stuff is impure, degrading, atrocious, abhorrent. You look at it and you see people with their vices and you're like, ew, you're a drunkard who cheats on his wife. Ew. Stuff is revolting and petty and you want to turn away from it. And it is also incompatible with the human spiritual nature that we all have. He says for teenagers, and his book is only about teenagers, the phone-based life is a form of spiritual degradation. Not even. He says specifically that it's not phones, it's smartphones with front-facing cameras that are more down or near towards where the devil is. So we literally have a folk devil described in this book in so many words. That's in chapter 8. He's labeled all those chapters really nicely, easy to find stuff. And he's talked about all these same talking points over and over and over again on different podcasts. So I'm not making this up. This is what he has said. So how do we know that this front-facing phone, smartphone being the devil, like how do we know that's not an exaggeration? How do we know that's a moral panic? We have a folk devil, but like maybe it's really the devil. Maybe the devil really lives inside my phone. Maybe it's true. Maybe you're at risk, just like me. Maybe he's right. Maybe there really is trouble in River City with a capital T and that rhymes with P and that stands for pool. Maybe our kids are really at risk. So how do we know if it's real or just a moral panic?
Yes. So there's a group of researchers. We can call them the skeptics. There are about 5 or 6 main ones, and then there's me and Jean Twenge on the other side. Let's call us the alarm ringers. Now they think that we are alarmists, and this is just another moral panic, and there's no evidence of harm that they say. And it certainly is true. Look, I'm a social scientist. The whole game in the social sciences is how do you figure out what causes what in a messy world?
Yes,
and that's why we have all kinds of different methods.
over, but it's usually over sillier things.
That's
but
right.
Go ahead.
So correlational studies are important as a first step, and that's why I was so hesitant in the coddling of the American mind to attribute any causality, because it was just correlational. And I said, parents don't freak out about this, just but because we really didn't know, it's just correlational, mostly correlational then. But then what we do is we say, well, okay, let's look to experiments. And I've been collecting the experiments. And if listeners go to anxiousgeneration.com/reviews, I have dozens of Google documents where I've been collecting the experiments on all kinds of topics. Because otherwise, we're all just citing experiments at each other. It's very confusing. So I wanted to put them all in one place. And guess what? There are now a lot of experiments, too. Now the debate has shifted from, it's all correlational, to, okay, fine, you've got experiments, but they're not very good experiments, and we're going to argue about that.
Because I just want to make sure, your assessment of your critics, they're not saying there's no evidence of harm, just so...
No, they literally say there's no evidence.
Some of them do, some of them don't, but go ahead.
You're right.
All right. They are saying some of your research is not rigorous. That's certainly true, and that's fair in some cases.
Well, I'm not doing original research on this. I'm collecting and interpreting
I get it.
other
The
people's
research you're using is not as rigorous, and I've read
some
them
of
all, too.
No, that's true. Oh, look, a lot of the experiments are
shit is how I would put them technically, scientifically.
That's a fine word. I try not to curse on air, but they were done by somebody with the students in their class.
They're criticizing your analysis of the research, but go ahead.
Okay.
Folk devils are something that everyone seems very concerned about. And you can tell that it's a moral panic whenever they're only concerned for certain groups of people. The image that keeps coming to my mind is the beach. If a lifeguard is at the beach and the beach is crowded, there's a lot of sharks in our area right now, something we're all very concerned about and on alert about. And we view the lifeguard as an authority figure in that situation. So if the lifeguard sees a shark in the water or knows of reports of sharks nearby, he tells everyone to get out of the water, not just some people. So if it's really dangerous, it would affect everyone. But this book is not about everyone. It is about a group of people that he claims are really hard to do research on, which is not true. That's not true. Is it a lifeguard telling us that a shark is in the water because he is in a position of authority as an academic, or is it a moral panic? While your parents may not be able to tell that AI Facebook post is fake, or that the people most likely to be radicalized into political extremism online are older people, this panic around smartphones, in this book at least, is only about young people, only about one group of people. It's only a concern for one group of people. Next is hostility. Whenever this concern about one group of people engaging with this folk devil comes about, there is hostility. If you see hostility along with these kinds of folk devils, you might be in a moral panic. Let's watch this clip.
No, she is doing something. She's talking on her phone. Instead of doing her work, she's talking on her phone. So I'm taking a video of this. Absolutely. Because that's what she said to do. Ma'am, I am doing it quietly. You're the one who's interfering. Then kick me out of the store so I can't pick up my package while she's the one that's doing it. The point is that she's multitasking while talking on the phone while she should be finishing the task. Instead, she's wasting her time talking on the phone.
Now she's talking to me.
So you can hear the phone talking.
There's a lot of open hostility towards young people being on their phones. Something about scrolling through Instagram or Pixie, taking a little video of your outfit in public. Those who are wrapped up in the moral panic into a real rage. What color am I looking for? With that one. Kind of like a brown, sort of. Haidt describes the phone-based life as spiritual degradation, and then he describes spiritual degradation as revolting, impure, abhorrent, incompatible with the elevated nature of humans. So you can see that the instinct to stomp the devil really means like yelling at a young person for doing this activity in front of them. Like they think it's disgusting. They think it's gross. They really do have some sort of sense that they are getting rid of a moral evil by bothering people who are on their phones, which is sort of absurd, but they're definitely like things or people or there are things in this world that make me feel that way. Not necessarily people, but there's stuff that I'm like, that's gross. And that's different for everybody, but I don't ever want to yell at anyone. And a lot of scientists are pretty critical of his research methodology and the conclusions that he makes with the information that he has. But instead of highlighting that, he says everyone agrees, everyone agrees, everyone agrees. Everyone can see that the mental health crisis is really bad among teenagers. And sure, the kids are sad, but is it the phones or are there other explanations that maybe make more sense?
Fears that pedophile scandals, the Catholic Church, Boy Scouts, everybody's going to molest your children. And sometimes there was, some of those were true, some were not. But you all locked up your kids too, and don't let them out until they're 10 or 12. And it's too late. It's too late for them to learn to be independent.
It's not in proportion to the actual problem or the effects of the problem. Let's get these kids away from these phones, away from social media, away from the front-facing camera. It is terrifying, and no one else is telling us what else it could be. Only I am doing it. Only I am here to help, and you can help too.
But I want you to address the other harms that have also been crashing around.
Oh, those are
them at
so
the same
easy.
Time.
Oh my God.
Okay,
those are so easy.
Okay, all right. So
if all
pandemic.
We had,
Okay.
If all we had,
Okay,
if all we had was data from the United States, then all of those things could be plausible explanations other than COVID, because this was almost all baked in before COVID. You can see a little perturbance in 2020, 2021, but it wasn't. Kids didn't get depressed because of COVID. They got depressed because they were isolated and alone, connecting on social media.
So sort of the rising middle class in the developed world around 2008, 2012, 2014, it's ramping up into a huge mental health crisis for Gen Z. Now, Gen Z is massively depressed and anxious, and it's something like we've never seen before. It's a huge problem. We need to get rid of the cell phones. We need to throw them all into the ditch.
Mass shootings, climate change.
Irrelevant, totally irrelevant. And the reason we know this, is that while it sounds compelling because the Newtown shooting was 2012, that does fit the timing perfectly. But why did things go up at the same time in the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavia? Like, why? Like, there's no way. And this is, again, one of the main critiques I get is, oh, Haidt is wrong to blame it on the phones. It's obviously poverty, racism, the 2008 global financial crisis. You compare mental health to any economic variable you want, you're not going to find an explanation there. So the fact that it's global and wherever, not global.
The many like social ills of a young person's world. Like,
Yes.
the reality, like active shooter drills and the reality of shooters. The fact that like some classrooms do have a litter box, but that's because sometimes they have to be locked down for a long time, and kids and people still have to go to the bathroom. It's not for like kids who identify as cats. I mean, if there is a kid who identifies as a cat out there somewhere, unfortunately, it is for them too. But it's not like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like,
The reason for the thing is actually tragic.
yeah, maybe that shit is really. Well, you know what I mean? Like, imagine like having that in your life and knowing that that's a thing you learned about because you do the drills and you know that that's a real. Someday you may have to poop in that bucket in the same room as all your classmates, boys and girls alike, and that sucks. And then like your fucking idiot uncle is ranting about some shit he saw on the news, or you see it on the news yourself. The news, like people talk about it as if it's like something that the kids are doing, or like somehow it's done to please the libs, or it's like, no, it's like so you can have all those guns and lives, no restriction.
Yeah.
It's actually so that we could like make schools unsafe so they can privatize it.
So Candace Augers criticizes Jonathan Haidt for only having one explanation for the mental health crisis among teenagers right now in this point in history. She says there are a lot of other causes it could be. The cause that you're suggesting, there really isn't a lot of evidence for that.
And the fact that it hits girls more than boys, and it hits the youngest, the 10 to 14-year-old girls harder, it's hard to explain that with any other theory. Do you have one?
Is engaging in a logical fallacy. Whenever he's asked about the lack of rigor in his research or in the research that he cites or his interpretation of the research, he says, well, no one else has a better idea as to what the cause of the mental health crisis could be. This is the only thing that makes sense globally. This is the only thing that makes sense for in the developed world with cell phones.
Starving was the way in which young women were silently expressing the social disorder of the bourgeoisie. Anorexia and schizophrenia became two ways of revealing the obscene truth hidden beneath the conformist life of a bourgeois family.
Causal reductionism. To one, you've reduced the causes. Causal reductionism. Assuming a single cause or reason for something when actually it's multiple causes or multiple reasons. Most scientists say stuff like contributing factors, or they hedge what they're saying a whole lot more because it's very difficult to say that this thing causes that thing at all. It's normally a lot more of a dynamic system of things happening all at the same time, affecting other variables. It's not a linear cause and effect unless you're trying to incite a moral panic, which he has been accused of a lot. So, causal reductionism. He will not accept that it might be more than one thing. It is this thing. And that's it. And that's all there is to it.
Well, raising my kids, I think these things, they're able to find out about it more with social media and phones and the quickness and the speed with which they found it.
Causal reductionism, or the fallacy of a single cause, is a huge problem because, oh, well, we thought it might be just one thing, but it turns out to be more. But he's advocating for policy decisions that affect children. Okay, because he's saying that teen mental health is bad, terrible, like the teens are all sad and anxious now because of cell phones, and it's only that one thing. Like, he is using the causal reductionist fallacy. It's dangerous because it gets rid of the chain of events that actually lead to the presence of symptoms with teenagers. Like, most things are affected by a large web of influences and complex causes. Like, everything is a million things all at once. Like, we are all an interconnected web of beings. We all affect each other, and we are all connected, and we all cause and affect each other. Like, it's a web of all of us, and to get rid of that entire chain and that entire web of causes that would eventually maybe result in mental health symptoms with the teenager is not only like moving us further away from the truth of the matter, but it's also quite dangerous. It's dangerous because if you try to pin all of the problems to one single cause, then you start making the responsibility of whatever ills there are in society, the responsibility of that one single thing. And that one single thing is front-facing cell phones. But he doesn't blame Apple for inventing the phone. He doesn't blame Mark Zuckerberg for very loose moderation problems that they've had. He sometimes does, but he does place a lot of blame on TikTok, which is not very surprising. But he's really pinning it all on the kids who are using their cell phones in sort of a normal way, and the parents who allow them, and then the school districts who allow the parents who allow the phones. Like, everything is down the line where we're kind of scapegoating and blaming children and their cell phones. The next thing is volatility. So right now, we might say that front-facing cell phones are just the worst. They're the devil. Social media is the devil, especially girls on social media. That's what he says a lot, is about girls in social media and how that's really bad for them and for society. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating for young people. It's frustrating for me. It's frustrating to see anyone in authority not actually seem interested in solving the harms that young people face.
Is no other theory on the table. Nobody has even proposed a theory for why it's happening in so many countries.
That study didn't look at teen girls and people who are depressed, though, correct?
Okay, yeah, that's true. I think it was either college students or young adults.
Right. And let me just point out the strongest way to prove a causal link between social media and depression in teenage girls would be to cite research that studies depressed teenage girls who use social media.
That's right, but the thing is, there are surveys of teenagers, so we do have survey data, which means we have correlational data from the UK and the US. But what he's asking for is experiments. It's really, really hard to do experiments on minors. That's why so many of them are college students, because we can't do experiments on high school students. It's very hard. So yes, I wish we had a study of depressed 15, 13-year-old girls.
Because that would be a proof, right? I mean, of the 16 studies you say show causal links, only one studies teenage girls.
That's right. But if Aaron and the critics were right that there's nothing going on here, the null hypothesis is true, there's no evidence of causation, then what we would find is just a lot of random noise, and some of it would show harms, some would show benefits, but that's not what we find. We find is that the large majority show harms, and we would also find that sometimes it's boys who suffer more, sometimes it's girls, but we don't find that. There's usually a sex difference, and if there's a sex difference, it's always girls who suffer more.
But you can do social experiments on minors. That's not...
It's just very hard.
Right, correct. Okay.
True experiment where you randomly assign. So, for example, can you imagine a study in a middle school where we randomly assign half of the kids to go onto a social media platform and half not? that's just much harder to do than with college students. You'd have to get parental approval. It's just never done. So I wish there was that study too, but there isn't.
But I want to get to, does that weaken your argument? Don't you want to be talking to depressed teenage girls on this rather than make the leap?
Well, I wouldn't say it weakens my argument. I would say there's so many different kinds of evidence lining up here. The experimental evidence, most of the experiments are not very strong. That's fine. He's right about that. Most of them are not very strong. But there's still a bunch that are pretty strong, at least by the standards of the social sciences. Now, you can be so skeptical that you say, you know what? It's just all crap. I'm just not going to believe it. All right, fine. But then what do I do? Do we just say, let's not do anything? There's no other explanation, but let's not do anything. Better sorry than safe.
I get your point, but the strong ones are mostly adults using Facebook. Yeah. What would you like to see then? Because if there's no real studies that are actually to the point you're making.
Okay, because here's the thing. Everybody's treating this with a dose response model. Everybody's acting like the number of hours you consume. Explain that
for regular people. Go ahead.
Okay. So, is alcohol good or bad for you? Is aspirin good or bad for you? Well, let's look at how much people consume. And people who drink a lot, they're doing worse. When a large dose is correlated with more bad effects, we say it's harmful. This thing is harmful, at least in large quantities. And that's been the approach to social media. But it doesn't work for social media, because if you take your daughter off, you say, okay, you're in 7th grade, everyone else has Instagram, you've been on it for 2 years, but we're taking you off. Is she going to be happier? No, she's now isolated. She's not going to be happier, even if it was Instagram that is causing her whole cohort to be so depressed and anxious. So what I'm really trying to say here is we have to look at this as a group level phenomena. And the experiment I've been calling for, the experiment I want to see, is we take entire schools. And I've been talking to governors about this. Like, can we find a school district, find 20 middle schools, 10 of them go phone free, 10 don't. Then that's the most important experiment, because now for the first time, it's never been done, for the first time, we would see what happens to the whole group when they are no longer using their phones for 7 hours a day.
Welcome to lawsuits, Jonathan. Welcome to lawsuits in terms of free speech.
No, in this case,
know that.
No.
I would love to see that, but you're not going to.
No, but because schools are going phone free, but they're doing it just, which, some schools choose to go phone free. And what I'm trying to say is let's get random assignment. Let's get a group of middle schools and then flip a coin on which ones go phone free this year. And then if it seems to be working, then the other half will go phone free next year.
Presumably factor in other factors that might happen in that area. But anyway, the vast majority of people who read your book don't have social science training, let alone time to analyze the studies you've listed and judge the accuracy of their claims, or your critics.
It's frustrating to see that he's being told what the issue is, and he just brushes it off and says, no, that's not it. And I know that's the point of the moral panic, is to divert our attention from the actual things that are actually problems for the young people in our lives, because there's massive incentives not to do anything about that. I mean, could you imagine?
Wait, so you're saying if we don't maintain the military-industrial complex as it is, then every person's dollars will depreciate in value in buying power internationally? Bingo, you cracked it. You figured it out. Good job, sweet. I just thought...
we average roughly 2 mass shootings a day. This is completely normalized. This isn't even front page news.
One day he's just going to say, oh, turns out it wasn't social media or cell phones that were really causing the problems for our kids. It was, and it'll be the next thing. And we'll all be ready for it and prepared.
Alienation became the emotional focus of Western middle-class families through a new form of silent protest and rebellion inside the family and toward the affluent society. Starving was the way in which young women were silently expressing the social disorder of the bourgeoisie. Anorexia and schizophrenia became 2 ways of revealing the obscene truth hidden beneath the conformist life of a bourgeois family.
They like more Tumblr or Pinterest or Instagram. They want to take pictures and look at beautiful things. That makes sense. Sure. How does that cause depression and anxiety?
And so what are the effects? The girls go straight for the visual social media platforms, especially Instagram, Tumblr, Pinterest in the early days.
So he says that women and social media comes out and girls are interested in the more like aesthetic based things on the internet. I still don't feel like I understand it. Like, okay, let's see if he can tell us.
The girls are now on these platforms that are all about, I post a picture of me and my life, and then I wait for strangers to comment on it. And that's really, really bad for mental health. And that, I think, is why the girls, as soon as we hit 2012, 2013, the girls have very sharp elbows in the graphs, very hockey stick lines in the graphs.
Okay, he says, I post pictures of myself in my life. Yeah, that's what people do on Pinterest and Instagram and Tumblr. And then you wait for strangers to comment on it. And that is what causes mental health. Like, by that logic, it seems like every marketing team analytics person is wildly depressed. Like, just looking at how many likes or follows or views that a post gets so causes depression. Okay. Is it the need for external validation that is the thing that causes the depression and anxiety?
Boys, on the other hand, they're playing video games especially. Video games aren't making them depressed. Now, the boys are getting more depressed and anxious. They are roughly twice as depressed and anxious as they used to be, but it's more gradual. It starts a little sooner. It starts more like 2009, 2010, and it's more gradual. So I think what's happening, and what Zach Roush and I concluded in the book, and here we drew on Richard Reeves, is, for girls, boom, they get on social media, they get depressed. For boys, they've been withdrawing from the real world since the 70s and 80s. It used to be a male world. There used to be a patriarchy, but boy, has it been dismantled.
Oh my gosh. You've heard it here first. Jonathan Haidt has declared the end of the patriarchy. That's amazing. Tell all the papers. That sounds so great. So I guess that's over. That's done. There used to be a patriarchy and it used to be a male world. But something has happened and now it's not anymore. So the men are withdrawing from life.
And as everything shifts towards girls, and as schools get more and more structured towards girls and girls' needs and girls' ways of learning, and as we all freak out about gender gaps and we think that it's the girls we have to help in the 90s, which wasn't true. Girls had already passed boys. Boys are finding that they don't do well in school. They don't like school. But man, these video games are just getting better and better. And it's hard to approach a girl, but man, the pornography is getting better and better.
Girls are better at school than boys now. So that is part of the end of the patriarchy, I think, is what he's trying to say. Men are not better than women. That is mean and misogynistic and rude. Like, we are different kinds of people with a wide range of experiences and feelings and wills and thoughts about the world. Like, we are pretty diverse as a planet.
And now you've got AI girlfriends, and soon AI girlfriends will be put into incredibly sexy robots. So what we're seeing is the progressive withdrawal of boys from effort in the real world that will pay off in the long run. And instead, boys' prodigious energy and their desires are being directed into a virtual world that generates nothing, absolutely nothing of any value in the real world.
Okay. Boys aren't adding any more effort in the real world anymore because they could just go see an AI girlfriend and she doesn't require much of him other than to sign up and exist. So boys are not trying to be challenged anymore with effort in the real world because they can get their needs met in the virtual world just as easily, I believe is what he's trying to say. That's kind of rude to boys and men. I think you're kind of being mean to everyone.
So it's my contention that men are being sedated out of their status seeking and reproductive seeking behavior through a combination of social media, video games, and porn. So they're not given a sufficient dose to make them happy or satisfied, but it is enough to dampen down and nerf that that impulse. So, and this is what I've called the male sedation hypothesis, and this is being studied. So why have we not got this? Yeah, I'm a illegitimate academic now. But this is, and there's a question to be asked there. But everything that you're talking about there, that it's triggering, it's playing off the back of this desire for them to work together as a team, to have intertribal warfare, to create mastery, to increase in status, to be able to accomplish things. Okay, but it's within the virtual world, and you can become an e-gamer and so on and so forth. But how much can you cash out that status into the real world? But then a more interesting question comes, which the gamers very well may do, and say, well, if I'm enjoying it, why do I need to cash it out into the real world? What is real and what isn't? Why is there this sort of weird axiomatic value judgment about the fact that the real world is better than the virtual world? It's all part of a world. It's all just dopamine, serotonin ticking around in my brain. Who cares? Same thing goes for porn. I worried about getting Me Too'd, or I don't have this thing, or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think having practice flirting in the virtual world is actually a great idea. I think you're right that I remember, when I was in 7th grade and the adults would organize a dance, it was terrifying. And occasionally I would ask a girl to dance and either she'd say yes or no, but it was terrifying. But again, that's that like fear and thrill when she does occasionally say yes. I agree that in theory we could do that the headsets, that the virtual reality, you really could give boys practice flirting with realistic girls, and the difficulty level could get harder and harder. Now, how would this actually play out in the real world? I fear that it's not really going to be, hey, let's try to make you into the best possible romantic partner, likely to find a really wonderful woman and then get happily married. I fear that it's going to turn into either, here's, the game is to get the woman in bed and then move on to the next woman. And here, it will teach you how to bed women. Or it's going to be design the woman you want. And you're going to, let's make her even lovelier. Let's give her an even better sense of humor. How about if she never gets mad at me? You program in all these things that are just going to take you in an unrealistic way.
We talked about this AI girlfriend revolution. One of the problems that you have, and one of the reasons that I don't think we need to fear the AI girlfriend thing quite as much, is no guy brags about the fact that he is subscribed to some woman's OnlyFans. The reason that you don't brag about it is that there is no status associated with being selected. There is no.
It makes you look like a loser.
And but not only that, that even if it was neutral in the like loser metrics, because you haven't been pre-selected by the gatekeeper is the price of a cheeseburger per month.
Your partner or the woman that you are with is a status symbol for you. Like, it is a marker of your status if you can get a girl to like you and say yes to you and go out with you. And it is not a marker of status to have like an online AI girlfriend or whatever it is that they've made up as sort of a folk devil for.
Therefore, anyone has access to this. And because of the access, it's, maybe if you have a $30,000 sex robot, it's a flex of your wealth, but it's also like, dude, you spent $30,000 on a sex robot. How weird are you? So, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I certainly know that pre-selection, the status associated with a woman who is the gatekeeper choosing a man who is the protagonist, that accounts for so much of the bragging rights of the guy.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it. He is saying that, hi Max, that men do not care as much about status, or what I would call like prestige.
Great. So this brings in a keyword we haven't mentioned is status. And boys and girls are each competing for status, but boys' competition is really much more, it's ultimately about like physical toughness, dominance, originally in sort of the primeval state, ultimately backed up by the ability to physically beat the shit out of somebody. But in modern times, that gets converted into other ways of contesting. And we've had a long, slow evolution of our economy, such that we've harnessed male ambition for status and turned it in productive directions.
Like he says, you can make someone work and they'll work really hard and they'll do a lot for status. And women like status But more importantly, I think he's starting to say that
men try very hard to make money, but it's not just money. When you can get status by doing something productive, that's going to challenge, like men are like rockets. Like they have this incredible capacity for work, but they're often misaimed. And so I think it's quite remarkable that, when, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos want to face off, how do they do it? Who can build the more effective rocket launch system into outer space? I mean, that's a great way for men to compete. So that's productive. And I think what you're saying, what you're pointing out is part of dating. I mean, part of it is very intrinsically motivated. You want a girlfriend, you want sex, you want love. But you also, you want a hot girlfriend. You want someone that other guys will respect you for because, I got this woman. So any discussion of boys, yes, we must consider status, especially what are other men going to think of me? And also what are other women going to think of me based on who I date?
That is trash. I do not like that. I am not a trophy. I am a human person capable of love and affection and real human relationships. I don't want my presence in a relationship to be like a marker of someone's status. I think that's really weird because women aren't trophies and women aren't objects, and like your life is more than the status you have in that life and in your community. Like you're alive, you have a life. Like, come on, that's been really mean and rude to women and girls, and it makes me go back and think like, oh wait, why do you have such a problem with stuff like Pinterest and Instagram and influencers or whatever it is that you made a boogeyman here? It's just stuff that women like. And the thing that you don't like about it is that women like it. Like, you post a picture and then you wait for likes. Like, okay, why do you care? You don't need to come into a school or a family or like in between the relationship between a parent and a child and decide what the rules are. Like, this is not your business. I'm pretty skeptical of the mouthpieces for billionaires telling me how to run my life. I think that it doesn't really give the billionaires who fund him, it doesn't benefit them for teenagers to use social media. It doesn't benefit them to have everyone to have a phone and to be able to share with each other and connect with each other about what's going on in the world. Because they're the ones doing things in the world that we want to know about.
Women are extremely concerned with what other women will think of them as well, separate status competitions. But yeah, that's a key. And video games give them an alternate world in which they can gain status within that alternate world. But I keep coming back to the metaphor of the black hole. Black hole is a place where anything gets sucked in, but nothing comes out. Now, a lot of them want to start their own business as an influencer. They want to create an app. So I'm not saying they're not lazy. What I'm trying to say here is, as far as I can tell, they have been raised in an economy where what you're desperately trying to do is get more followers, get more influence, and it's all quantified. And as long as you're working hard at that, you're not generating anything that will leave the black hole of social media, nothing that will affect the world outside of your closed world of people seeking status.
I'm sure that you're aware of it, but the percentage of primary school kids that say that they want to grow up to be a YouTuber or an influencer.
The hypersexualization, the pornification of everything, the fact that you've got these young girls on Instagram aping these millennial women with gigantic boobs and butts and fillers and all kinds of things. This is just really, really bad for them. So even if they don't get depressed and anxious, and they do, but even if they didn't, the fact that oh my God, the number of girls now, middle school girls, who are using skincare products and who are concerned about their skin, and doing makeup tutorials, like, no, your skin is perfect. Go have fun. Yes, you'll care about how you look. Girls have always cared about how they look. That's part of life. It's for boys too. But to take these, wonderful, sprightly, funny, 5th, 6th grade girls And then suddenly to have them focus so much on their face and their beauty because they're on social media is a tragic loss of girlhood.
And if you can cut off that communication for some people, well, like that's good for people doing stuff in the world that they want to keep secret. You are just fear-mongering and trying to be a moral entrepreneur for the likes of the Koch brothers, I think. Like, that's not cool. You're playing on people's insecurities because the economy is not good. And as it gets better, like, people get more stuff and you feel like it might get really bad again. And that feeling that it might get really bad again is a fear, and that fear is an insecurity, and that insecurity, like, is desperate to be soothed by anything. And you're playing on that want to feel like everything is going to be okay by telling moms and school districts that the issues that actually put our kids in danger are exaggerations. And you want to see how far you can go. And that's fair. Like, get your bag, get your money, do whatever. But I don't think it's cool. I don't think it's cool to use psychology as a front to do and say whatever kind of nonsense research that you want. There is academic standards and ethics. I don't think it's cool to take money from the people you take money from. I don't think your staunch centrist view on things is very cool. I think it's cowardly to not take a stand. I think it's cowardly to not desperately want to do everything you can to keep kids safe. Aren't you a man? I'm sorry, that's like number one, protect. And you're out here saying that, like, school shootings are not a problem. It's the disproportionality for me. The disproportionality is what really sends my alarm bells off, like, to say, whoa, this person is lying to me. Because death or fear of death is so much worse than the feeling of insecurity or anxiety. You can be depressed and alive. No one's protecting anyone. No one's protecting these kids. No one's standing up for the kids. No one is making policies towards trying to keep the kids safe from the actual dangers that they face. And that is a different kind of insecurity. It's more like a fear of danger, not just like, oh no, I'm worried that my status is going to be affected because a girl did something better than me. Like, you guys sound like you're in the 4th grade. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if a girl does something better than you. Like, please get over it. If your whole life is just status and prestige and, like, what can I brag about? Like, give it a rest. Seriously. Your manhood and who you are has nothing to do with the other sex. It does not have anything to do with the comparison of you to anyone. Play and spontaneity is only really possible when a person feels safe. If you're in your environment and you're always looking around to see, what is that? What is that? What is that? What will my caregivers think of what I think? What will my caregivers think of how I feel? What if what I want is not the right thing for my caregivers? You can't really be yourself, and you can't be yourself, you can't really play. The issue is not the phones. Play occurs in safety. So if play isn't occurring, it's almost like the kids don't feel safe. I wonder if there's anything else that the kids have to worry about. It's got to be something.
I just thought it was like a fiat-backed currency. I thought there was like a paper dollar for every dollar in a bank account. No, you naive little child. There's a bunch of digital currency that's been printed out by the US government running up a trillions of dollars deficit that we only don't have to pay back because we've got the strongest military in the world by a mile. And so if we don't maintain that with half of our discretionary spending every year, then we don't have a valuable dollar anymore. So basically, if you try and stop it, your money will lose value. You know what's funny? What? I'm actually in a bunch of debt. So if the US dollar loses value, then my debt gets smaller. Wait, no. The debt's supposed to be something you're ashamed. No, I get you. So if we end the military-industrial complex, everyone who is in debt, their debts will shrink because the dollar won't be worth as much, so it'll be a lot easier to pay back the debt. But interest rates will skyrocket. But who's gonna enforce them if the military-industrial complex has collapsed, huh? You don't know. You don't get to know. No. Uh-oh, did I trigger someone with creative thinking? You're just supposed to do what I said. That's why we traumatized you in elementary, middle school, and high school. Yeah, and then I healed. So let's stop doing this before it destroys the world. No, but I want my money.
Isn't about teenage anxiety. It's about the parents. We are the anxious generation. The moms. It's easy to have anxiety about your kid. It's a million things all at once, all the time. I feel like he's playing with my vulnerabilities as a mom. I feel like he's taking that sense of, I hope everything turns out okay, and he's exploiting it for his own gain. And I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. I think it's kind of mean. I think it's sort of rude. Change this light up. Okay. Candace Augers is one of Jonathan Haidt's major critics, and she claims that the moral panic around cell phones bringing kids down to the devil is a distraction from the real causes and the rises of mental illness for kids and teens. She claims that the real causes are the obvious societal ills that we have failed to address. What do you think about that as a concept? Do you buy it?
What?
I'm going to try to say it again. One of Jonathan Haidt's major critics is named Candace Augers. She wrote a piece in Nature reviewing the book The Anxious Generation, and she says that the moral panic of cell phones and bringing the kids down to where the devil is a moral panic and a distraction from the real causes of the rise in mental health issues, mental illness among children and teens. And she says that the real causes are the obvious societal issues that we've failed to do anything about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that seems like what we've been saying.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one thing for there to be a problem, but it's another thing to know that the adults in charge don't seem to be concerned about the problem.
Yeah. Well, at least in this country, we've just seen again and again and again and again and again and again and again the lack of response of any kind to school shootings.
Yeah.
They're telling you what their priorities are.
It's not the safety of children.
When people tell you who you are, you should listen.
Yup. I'm Kristen.
When people tell you who they are, that you should listen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, when people tell you who you are, if that's what I said.
I don't know.
I might have said that.
So it isn't that John and Candace are looking at different data necessarily, but their approach to what they're looking at is a little different. So I wrote a little example here. Do you want to read this? Just a sentence.
A storyteller, a community wise man, a NASA astronomer, an astrologer, and a toddler may all look at the same night sky, but the way they look at it is different.
John's approach is to start with the policy and work backwards to the problem. In academics, this is called p-hacking, and it generally doesn't pass the peer review process. Beyond his slimy attempt to start from the end, how can we convince parents to agree to public education policy introduced by the Libertarian Koch brothers, who believe we all ought to be free to sell ourselves into slavery, pollution should be legal, and child labor and marriage laws are too strict? Where are existing anxieties that can be exploited for this goal?
I think it's a good idea to every so often make a list of like, what are the things that I need to be alive as a person, and get connected with that list. Maybe go camping or spend some time outside or grill on the beach. Like, do something that really nourishes your sense of being alive and a person. And that really helps in saying, like, is this the problem, or is it the things on this list not being met? So, like, something that you need to have to be alive, to have a safe environment, is food safety, food storage. If suddenly one day every fridge was broken and no one could safely store their food, well, that wouldn't be a moral panic. That would just be a regular panic. So if you can look at the list of things that you made, of like, these are the things that actually keep a person alive, and you should include on that list connection with other people, entertainment, joy, pleasure, a soft place to, like, a safe sleeping environment, a safe place to sleep. Like, you need all of those things to be a person.
Okay, what did we just see? You were just saying stuff about tits.
Should we get our chairs out?
Oh my.
It's called acting.
Acting!
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.